Hi, welcome to my channel where we provide an alternative view to the common narrative. Today I'm going to talk about China, Taiwan, and the USA, and the narrative that a war can start in that part of the world. So if you are interested, please continue watching. Welcome back to the channel. Today is Saturday, the 25th of February. And as I have indicated in my introduction, there is now running a narrative around that for a while that there's going to be a conflict between the USA and China, where the USA will basically instigate hostilities, which he has done now for years. But it's coming supposed to come to a head, and then China will try to invade Taiwan, and then the US will come to the aid of Taiwan and defend Taiwan and get into a battle with China, and then we have maybe World War III scenario. And there are some articles that came out lately and so on, because the Americans are more and more sanctioning China. This whole story about the balloon shoot down apparently was a big issue for China. Now, unfortunately, we don't know, and we don't really know the culture, nor do we really always understand how these people think. So making that assumption is a little bit enthusiastic, if you would call it like that. We saw with Nancy Pelosi last year, the visit and all the warning that China gave. And most of the guys thought, oh yeah, so China's going to start the war with the US because Nancy Pelosi has dared to visit Taiwan. And well, that never happened. But what did happen was a huge military exercise of the Chinese and surrounding of Taiwan with naval ships and basically enforcing an embargo. And there were also some sanctions placed against some of the Taiwanese companies. But the whole thing doesn't make sense for me. I'm sorry to say that. There's another development on the European side, and we all know about it. That's the Russian-Ukraine military conflict, and the EU that has totally committed themselves to supporting Ukraine and destroying themselves. But they have provided weapons, ammunition for Ukraine for how long now? For how many billions now? And it's like, I think, $160 billion in total. Not only weapons, but administrative and assistance as well, money assistance. And until that matter has been resolved, there cannot be any conflict in the East. Doesn't matter how you look at it. But there are two things that are important that you have to take out from the European conflict. And the one is that the West and NATO is running out of so-called ammunition and weapons to supply. And that's a very important fact. And secondly, basically, NATO cannot afford a second front to support and fight two superpowers at the same time. And if they don't prevail in Ukraine, then how can they motivate any other country to play a proxy war role in the conflict between the USA and China? And I don't understand that. I cannot see that Taiwan would commit themselves, number one, as a proxy fighting army for the USA, if they can see that the USA is not even capable of supplying them with the necessary weapon and ammunition. And if they cannot, and they are not the manufacturing of a lot of armament themselves, so basically they are dependent on the importation of weapons. And if the weapons cannot be manufactured and supplied, then the result of any conflict with China is a foregone conclusion. And the same we have now with Japan. Japan has said that they want to spend more money on their military and became basically an aggressive nation again, against all what they say. And they want to purchase American weapons. And they have a US base with a lot of aircrafts on them in order to, as a forward base for the Americans. But again, functioning as a proxy army for America is also not going to work in Japan. For a simple reason is there's not enough ammunition and military equipment that the Americans can supply. Now they've ordered, they are also not a production of military equipment, or at least not of the heavy stuff. So they are in the process of ordering 500 Tomahawk missiles. 500. So is China now going to attack, is Japan now going to attack China with 500 Tomahawk long-distance cruise missiles? Slow-flying cruise missiles that can easily be shot down. And then the ammunition is gone, and what then? What then? Then Japan is in big trouble. Doesn't matter if they have tanks. Tanks can't shoot that far. The few Navy ships that they have, doesn't matter. And the same goes for Taiwan. And just for interstate, Taiwan is about 100 miles from the shoreline of China. That's about 160 kilometers. So if there's a battle, all they have to do is the Chinese, they have plenty of long-distance missiles, cruise missiles, ballistic missiles, various explosive loads or warheads sizes. And they just sit on their beach and they fire the one missile after the other one, and Taiwan can do nothing. And should Taiwan have some long-distance missiles like the Tomahawk itself, I'm sure the Chinese will have some sophisticated air defense system to protect their artillery and then shoot them down. And then Taiwan is a sitting duck. So Brian Maletic has now made a video about a special war exercise, not a war exercise, simulation that the Americans have done that should US get involved in terms of protecting Taiwan against China, then at the end of the day, Taiwan would be destroyed as a country, but they will politically win the war. And the Americans and the Chinese will have severe losses, but apparently the Americans will prevail in this war as well. But that's only if China decides on an amphibious attack on Taiwan. And then this article, or this study even admitted that, yeah, well, China can do missile attacks on them, they can do aviational attacks on them, they can do an embargo like they did with after Nancy Pelosi, they can do a lot of other things. So why is anybody even doing a military attack simulation on China? You know, that's a thing. The whole story with Nancy Pelosi has shown you that the Chinese are very cautious, very patient, and they're not so much they're not going to commit themselves like that with a war against the US. They have a lot of other tools available. And if I watch China, like I said many times, what is China's biggest asset? That is a microchip manufacturing facilities, who are world-class and on which the Americans are dependent on. So destroying one or two of these factories as a token exercise, then who's going to ask for peace? Because China can destroy the whole industry and every single factory. And just remember, Taiwan is an island which has a limited space. So where is Taiwan going to store all these supposed new weapons that America going to supply? They're going to be all Russia. The Russian-Ukraine conflict has clearly shown us that there is no more such thing as hiding behind the front lines. Manufacturing, keeping your industry going. Any target can be reached by a missile and can be destroyed. That is clearly what has been shown in Russia, UK. So you can hide nothing on Taiwan unless you store it deep on a mountain. But then we have even debatable point of view, you cannot reach that as either. Seeing how protected that storage area will be. But as soon as you take the weapons out, they become vulnerable again. So I don't understand this whole matter. But like I said, China wouldn't do that. Easy. Do an embargo, blockade, maritime blockade on Taiwan. And token destroy some or other critical infrastructure. Doesn't have to be the microchip, can be anything that is of critical value, just to show Taiwan and so on, and America that it's not worth your while. And the other important thing about Taiwan is that the current president, who is Tsai Ing-wen, she's now 2023, last year, next year there's election. Her party had some local elections, city elections recently, and their party did very, very bad. Most of the people in Taiwan don't want any conflict with China. They want peace, and they're quite happy to join China in a special arrangements like Hong Kong. So they don't want war. And her party has lost a lot of support and candidates. So it seems very likely that her party will lose the election next year and be not in control of Taiwan itself, but a more peaceful party. And what will the Americans then do? Well, then they are stuck. Then they can't use Taiwan. But let's take even say the war starts. China starts to do a maritime blockade. USA sends their navy. So then the scenario would be we would have a maritime war. And in this case, supposed to be the Americans will defeat the navies of China. Well, I've got to disappoint you. That's not going to happen. Why not? Well, firstly, the Chinese have more ships than the navies have, and the US have. They are building their third aircraft carrier, but it doesn't matter in the scenario of Taiwan and China, because China is only 100 miles away. So they don't need any aircraft carriers if there's a conflict around Taiwan. I don't see that. They can shoot hypersonic or whatever, these very fast hypersonic missiles from the land mass on American ships, vessels, whatever you want to call them. They can sink any US aircraft carrier from land. They don't need to employ or put their own navy into danger. And just remember, China has all of its navy available, where the US doesn't have all the available vessels in the conflict, because they have to protect other parts in the world as well. So you have a huge disadvantage in terms of number. And then, just for interest sakes, the US has about 69 submarines, which will play a huge role. But the Chinese have 59. 67, 59. was it 57? Sorry, but it's more or less around there. And they have 6 nuclear missiles, nuclear ballistic missile carrying nuclear submarines, 6 of them. So then we have only a war around Taiwan. And do the people really think that is the end of the story? Whoever wins that battle is the end of the story? No. Then the war will expand. And China will probably send their submarines with their nuclear submarines, with their ballistic missiles on it, to the shorelines of the West Coast and start bombarding American cities. And vice versa. Now, it's easy to talk about, say, Taiwan. It's a small country, an island. What about how are you going to conquer China? How are you going to do an amphibious landing or whatever landing, beach landing, D-Day, on Chinese shore and then conquer the whole of China? And similar, how are you going to do a D-Day on on American soil and conquer America itself? Those type of wars will not happen. It will be a standoff military missile type of war. And the losses will be terrible. Because there's one problem with this thing. A normal warhead, let's make it 500 kilogram, which is huge. 500 things of explosives. What can it destroy? It can destroy an apartment building. But that's it. So, let's say you want to attack New York. Say the Twin Towers still existed. So you have to send 2 ballistic missiles with a conventional warhead to destroy the 2 towers. And then that's it. What about the rest of the city? Well, you can't destroy it with conventional weapons. The only way you can mass destroy it is nuclear weapons. So what's the chance then of wanting to destroy more at any given time? And then what is supposed to lead then to nuclear war? Because in terms of nuclear armament, the Chinese are behind the Americans, but they still do have a lot. And they still have good anti-air defense systems, air defense systems. So both countries will suffer severely. And then we talk about Japan. Again, Japan, how far is it away from mainland China? Not that far. Ballistic missiles, long-distance cruise missiles, destruction of the city, the high-dense population of Japan, a small island, limited landmass. You don't need an army. You can surround it, and because Japan is dependent on energy imports. It's the same thing that I read this article about, China is building up their navy. But by the way, they have about a target of 400 ships, vessels, navy. The Americans have less than 300, by the way. The Chinese have more shipyards that build military vessels. They have apparently 6 huge ones and 2 small ones. If you listen to what happened to the previous new ships built by the British, that ship is more in a shipyard than on open sea. A brand new American, I don't know if it's a cruiser or a frigate, I don't know these things. It was brand new, cost them billions of dollars, and it's basically scrap. Doesn't work. But then I read, but American shipbuilders are much better trained artisans and skilled labor than the Chinese. Well, the Chinese stuff works. American stuff doesn't work. We're talking about ships, no? Vessels, Navy ships. So I'm not sure why the Americans always go onto their high technology and skill level and so on. That era is gone. And that doesn't exist anymore. Excuse me. So I don't see any conflict at this stage between the US and China. Not until the Russian-Ukrainian one has been resolved. And even then, Taiwan will not stand by and be a proxy army. Because next year, that lady is gone and replaced by a more peaceful, and then the relationship between Taiwan and China will recover. So that's not going to happen. And they have to, and if they even are willing to be the proxy army, then they should be put against the wall and shot in any case. Because they are super dumb if they cannot see what's happening in Ukraine. Japan is unfortunately a different story. Just like Germany, I don't believe she ever recovered her sovereignty. She's still under control of America. And she probably is doing what America is telling them to do. So, being it their own choice or not, that's a difficult thing at this stage to determine. But I don't think they are totally sovereign. Just like Germany. But again, the people will not allow it. The Japanese have lost their will to fight or be aggressive. It's going very well with them in terms of financial and living standards. So why would they give up all that for a fight, for a war that's not theirs? But I forgot actually to mention something. The problem is it's not only there. There's an elephant in the room, which nobody's really talking about. And I'm not totally sure if it is an elephant or not. But that's India. Now, India has some border disputes with China, but it also has a border dispute or a province dispute, Kashmir, with Pakistan. And that war between Pakistan has created a war. There was some action on the India-Chinese type of border. And according to what I understand from another guy that thinks more or less like me, is that he believes that the US is going to try to convince India to attack China as well. Because although India is part of the BRICS countries, it's very neutral regarding the other type of agreements. Yes, he supports Russia because Russia at this stage gives him super cheap oil. And Indians are greedy and business-like, and they're going to exploit it and going to make big bucks on it. But it doesn't mean that there are big buddies with Russia like China and Russia is at this stage. Also, you can see that India is part of the Quad establishment, and they are together with Russians and China. So they're buttering their bread on both sides. They have bought mostly Russian weapons, but they are considering buying American weapons. So for me, at this stage, India is a country that I'm very cautious about of trusting to be on the Chinese-Russian side. And I believe if the deal is sweet enough, they might change their mind. But this is highly speculative. But in any case, so the third party in a US-China war would be India. But unfortunately, I highly doubt that. Again, it's not worthwhile for India to commit to something destructive as a war. Because wars cost money, cost lives, it causes destruction, and a hell of a lot of other problems. So I don't think Modi is an idiot enough or dumb enough to fall for this type of trick. So, I don't know. Yes, America is going to antagonize China more and more. Sanctions more and more. It has to do it. What else can it do? It can only threaten. It can only do sanctions. That's the end of the story. That's the end of their power. Military-wise, they cannot do anything. It doesn't matter how you look at it. It's on the other side of the earth, America and China. That's a huge distance from home. Yes, they have bases in Philippines and so on, but still, shipping lanes, logistics, supplies, all on open sea, all targets for submarines. That is why, but basically in any case, that is why China is building this huge navy and submarines. The Americans naturally would like to accuse China that, hey, they want to be imperialistic and conquer and threaten other countries. No. China is dependent on the supply routes like energy from the Middle East. And in the Second World War, America cut off the oil supply to Japan. And that was the reason for the Japan attack Pearl Harbor. Although Japan had very sophisticated submarines, they never used the stuff. And that was the biggest fault, error that they made. But in any case, so China has built up its navy for one purpose and one purpose only: to protect the sea lanes, the supply lines for Chinese energy and goods and minerals and imports and exports. Don't let anybody else bamboozle you for a different reason. Like I said, sanctions don't really help. It just forces other countries, big countries like China, to become self-sufficient. It's like the Chinese, oh yeah, the Chinese are very bad. They can't manufacture 7 nanometers microchips and so on. They don't know the technology. The Chinese are not capable of doing it. Well, what did the Chinese do, or what were they accused of? They bought British fighter pilots, brought them to China, and let them train the Chinese Air Force. Why cannot China go to the Netherlands companies and I don't know, with the other one, Britain or so, Netherlands, Britain, but then make these high-tech microchip machines? They'll take the whole team. Say they get €100 a year now. Pay them €1 million. Make it as, you can't refuse the offer. And that's how you import the technology. And the Chinese have already done it with the British fighter pilots. So again, let America put the sanctions on it. It's not going to work. I've said it before, I think in one of my videos. I worked for the arms industry. And during the apartheid era, there were a lot of boycotts and sanctions against South Africa. But we got all the secret high-tech stuff. It was all like smuggled into South Africa. And when finally the sanctions were lifted, we couldn't get anything because they all had end-user certificate requirements. So suddenly we couldn't get any of the high-tech stuff. So do the sanctions, and then the sanctions sidestep by smuggling, and China will get everything that they need. So I don't think we should fear that much about it. What I'm more concerned about is what's happening in Russia and Ukraine and so on. But I have a different theory as well. I've spoken it before, but I will address it in another video. So this is my story for today. If you like what you heard, please subscribe if you haven't. Tell your friends. Spread the word. Press the bell button. Press the like button if you want. Until next time, cheers.